Welcome to Crossing Face. I'm John Pinna, and today I have a long-standing friend. We've been in the same room before. We've interacted, and we have a lot of friends and colleagues that we share. Mr. Eric Roux from URI, the United Religious Initiative. Thank you for spending the time with me.
Thank you, John. Very nice to meet you again online.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So you're in Brussels.
I'm based in Brussels. Yes, indeed.
And you're a Frenchman. You were born in France.
Yes, I am.
All right. I was looking at your name, and I always say to myself, I've known you as Eric, so I go, it must be Roux. It must be, because I have to really kind of think about it. I had a long night in New Orleans. My sister went to Tulane, and needless to say, I woke up the next day in the business district and with my cousin. And we go to the payphone. This is before cell phones. And I call my sister, and my sister says, "Where are you?" And I said, I'm on St. Charles. And she goes, "St. Charles and what?" And I go, Karen delete. And she goes, "Caron delay, honey." So so now I'm always very critical about my French, because I was, you're waking up and you've had a long night. You're very, I was a very young man. And I go, Karen delete. And she goes, "Caron delay, honey." And she still makes fun of me. And this is 30 years ago. So I wanted to make sure. I was like, it's got to be.
Roux is okay, and I'm used to listen to my name in several languages. When I go to Spain, they say, "Hola, señor Roux."
Roux, yeah.
It's okay for me, It's
Yeah, no. Well, that's the thing. It's like John. My name's John, and it's easily translated. It's Yahya in Arabic, but it's it's Ivan in Russian or Giovanni in Italian. It's an easily portable name, But French, you always got to be a little careful, So. But so I was like, I don't want to insult you, embarrass myself. So I was like, that's the first story that comes to mind, is this New Orleans, with my sister. So on delay, honey, and she still does that every once in a while when she's trying to, correct me with something. But you're at URI. I've like I said, we spent the last time we saw each other was at the ministerial. The first ministerial, which was the sort of largest gathering of multi-faith, civil society and government officials in one place. That was hosted in 2017, and so that was the last time we saw each other. But from you and I share similar parallels. We both started our careers very similarly in like the early 2000s. I think I was 1999, and you're thereabouts in the multi-faith space. Maybe talk a little bit about how did you get into this space? Like, we do get a lot of questions about like why would you get into this business? And I always say it's a growth industry because religious persecution's on the rise. So it's definitely a growth industry. So that's one reason to get into it if you really want to have a steady career. I go, there's no money in it. That's the other problem. So it's a growth career with no money. But how did you get started in the religious freedom space?
Well, yes, I don't know if it's an interesting story or not, but whatever. I have a background. I'm a Scientology member of the church, but in the clergy, meaning I've been working in the church, for the church, for many years, more than 30 years. And at one point, I would say that I had internal duties for a long time. And that was very okay with me. I was a big fan of Scientology. I love my religion. I love my parishioners, and I was working for the church. And then we were in France at that time, and that was not so funny for Scientology. A lot of discrimination, a lot of attacks, a lot of anything that would make you feel your freedom of religion is threatened. And so at one point, I decided that I needed to do something about this. And I started by defending Scientology on an external ground. But rapidly, I realized that it's very difficult when you are the minority being oppressed or whatever, discriminated against, to defend yourself, because you are always suspicious. Right. So, you have the media against you. Sometimes, like in France, you have the government against you. And you come and you say, "Please respect my religious freedom." And everybody laughs at you because for them, it's not a question of religious freedom. You do not even deserve it. And and I thought maybe I should meet with other people who faced similar things, or maybe could help from another point of view, not being Scientologist, but and I started meeting with many people in other religions and realized that, in fact, some of the, first of all religions, even if they are a majority in your country not being discriminated against, they are a minority somewhere and they have problems.
Right.
Second, I realized that some of them had more troubles than my community would have. You know, being a Uyghur in China is worse than being a Scientologist in France, no question. You know, so you start having a different point of view, and I'm always interested in other religions. I'm always interested in people, and I started like sometimes helping others who had troubles. And rapidly, I realized that you are never as strong as when you are several people from different faiths together defending another faith. You
Sure.
know, it has so many advantages, and it's so more powerful that it has become my line of combat. You know, combat for religious freedom, combat against ignorance. You put people together of different faith, and when somebody has troubles, you all come together to help that person.
Right.
And so that's how I started. I traveled into Europe, met with religious leaders, met with religious freedom advocates. I loved it. We worked together. Some of them decided that I was pretty efficient, and I can agree. Sometimes I am, most of the time, and we did good work, and that was the start of it.
I don't know. I mean, is it when it comes to like the lens of Europe? So France is a Catholic country, Catholic majority country, right? And then you have the overlay of the EU. How do those structures work when it comes to religious freedom? Is that the advocacy that happens in country, and then and the larger whole? Because you're based in Brussels, but you know, how does those mechanisms work? The sort of large overlay of the EU with the individual countries.
That's a good question. Well, I think, I mean, the power of Europe is limited for several reasons. One is that the states keep a lot of prerogatives when it comes to how they treat religions. It should not be, because you have the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. You have also the bigger Council of Europe, European Convention on Human Rights. But still, it's very different if you go from one country to another. And the way religions are treated are very different. So first of all, nationally speaking, you go from one country to another, and it's a different problems. Um, like you go to Spain, Scientology is completely recognized, no problem. You go to France, it's different. You go to Hungary, it can be terrible. You know, you are Muslim, you know that France is maybe not a good country. Obviously, maybe not as bad as others. You know, I don't want to put a picture that would be too much um, bad, which is not
Right.
true. Then you go to Greece, and maybe they have more problems with the Catholics than with Scientology. You know, we are recognized in Greece, but Catholics for a long time were considered a cult. Why? Because it's a mainly Greek
Yeah.
Orthodox country. You know, so
Yeah.
it's diverse, um, and Brussels is interesting because you meet people from all of these countries. And we are trying, you know, there is a community for religious freedom, which is trying to like educate all these people, all these politicians, and each other, you know, civil society, to educate about what is religious freedom. Are you still here? It looks like you disappeared. I hope you will come back.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, you disappeared, but now you're back.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It just things just, yeah, things went crazy. So, all right, we're okay. We're okay. So
Yeah.
sorry, cut out for a minute, but we'll edit that out and everything will be fine. So we were talking about the differences in the different countries. We were at Greece.
Yeah, and then when it goes to Brussels and the European Union, it's a place where you will work for educating people there who are from every country from Europe, educating on what is religious freedom. I mean, the main problem for religious freedom is ignorance. There is the ignorance of the religious communities themselves. You know, a religious community you don't know is always weird. And it's very easy to fuel false information about them or portray it in a certain way because people do not know it. And when politicians do not know, they work in that direction, and it's bad. But there is also a big ignorance of what is freedom of religion or belief. Uh, and sometimes it goes as far, ignorance is not only complete ignorance, it can be a false knowledge. Give you some examples.
Right.
Some people think that religious freedom is something for the far right Christians.
Right.
So they don't like religious freedom because of this. Completely stupid, finally. Why? Because religious freedom is for everyone, has
Sure.
nothing to do with politics, left or right, no question. But on the other side, you have people who think that religious freedom is religious freedom for themselves. So you will have a Christian group who only advocate for themselves, and if somebody else has troubles, it's normal, but not for Christians. You go to Hungary, you have great speeches about religious freedom is so important for
Yes.
Christians.
Yeah.
Okay, good, but the problem is when it's only for one, it's not religious freedom, of course.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, we have a lot of, I mean, that's the challenge we're dealing with domestically here, is the conflation of religious freedom with religious liberty. And so that where it's and religious freedom meanings, the definition moving into practice. And so so now it's not freedom to believe, not believe, change and choose. It's not just that. It's now I have practice, which means that I can, if you're not of my faith, I think that you may not deserve dignity, that type of thing. And without getting too deep into the weeds here, but that happens also in Muslim majority countries. So I mean, I deal with that. My organization deals with interfaith work, and I know these guys. Like I know Sistani, I know Ben Baya, I know like I engaged the Ummah for years and years and years, and still there's this idea of, because we're the majority, this is the way it needs to be, and so very, very difficult to sometimes engage when you're trying to combat the idea that, well, religious freedom means my practice, and my practice then needs to overlay into who you are and your identity, and then it really gets it's very clearly a crossing the line in religious freedom. All right, but the challenge is that when you're in that situation, you may not be able to deal with that judiciously because you're being oppressed. For example. So I know that the Church of Scientology, there's a lot of difficulty in the Russia and the post and the former Soviet republics, and the first 10 years of my career I went to school in Russia, went to school in Moscow. And then I spent the first 10 years of my career in Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, right in that area. And I would always tell the Jehovah's Witnesses, I'd be like, look, guys, just don't print pamphlets. And they're like, why? I go, it just feels like kind of revolutionary work. It just feels like that, because that's how the Bolsheviks operated. It would be pamphlets, it'd be stuff. I go, it feels like that. And so it really, if you just didn't print out the documents, that might work, but that's part of who they are. And so, but the problem is when it sets people off, it's very, very difficult when you have long histories of consolidated faith around one narrative. And so, maybe you talk a little bit about like what when you're on the church level, Church of Scientology level, when you encounter that, how are you combating that within the church, and then the larger you or I, if you're advocating for someone else?
Well, it's a good question, but actually it's not difficult. I mean, in the Code of the Scientologist, it's written that a Scientologist should defend religious freedom for all.
Right.
So when I am defending religious freedom, I'm just doing my duty as a Scientologist.
Right.
So it's not something that it's not something that I add to it. It's part of me. And what is good is I have no problem doing it because I like it fundamentally. It's part of my duty as a faith leader. And there is nothing that is contradictory in it. I'm not advocating for bad things. I'm advocating for people having the right to their own beliefs. And that's something very Scientology oriented.
Right.
It's part of our DNA. So I feel very comfortable with it. It's more a question of time. Like and quantity of work. I have to do the work I do for the church. I have to do the work I do for URI. I have to do the work I do for religious freedom. And fortunately enough, I like to work.
Right. Well, I'm defined by my work too. Everybody, I retired and I'm working harder now, with all the work that I'm going on. So how is URI a force multiplier in your work? So because URI, maybe do a little bit of a dive into URI and how it how it works with the church and the larger multi-faith community to have impact.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So starting by how I entered in URI. So I think in 2013, something like this, I'm in the field of religious freedom for a long time. And one of my partners is from Bulgaria. His name is Father Petar Grammatikov. He's a Bulgarian Orthodox. We are very good friends, and we work together on religious freedom. And he talks to me about URI. And he says, "Oh, we had something called European Interreligious Forum for Religious Freedom, and he was part of it. And he tells me we should become a URI cooperation circle, which
Hmm.
is affiliated group of URI."
Sure.
I say, "Why not?" I try to look at what is URI. I think it's a good idea, but it's just one more thing. So I just apply for having this organization being affiliated with URI.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's how I started, like by just applying. Then I've been interviewed by URI. They accepted the organization as a cooperation circle. I was the head of the organization, so I become the contact point for the organization with URI. And actually, I engaged with people from URI, and it was very refreshing for me. And the reason is when you are in the field of religious freedom, I mean, it sometimes it's tough. You do advocacy for groups who are really oppressed, and it's everyday oppression for those ones in China, in Afghanistan, in France, in whatever. Always the bad side of no religious freedom.
Sure.
And then I enter in a circle where people are doing other things. URI is much more diverse. You have people working for environment, you have groups working just into interreligious dialogue, other ones working for organizing things for the poor, whatever is fulfilling a good interfaith cooperation towards the purpose of what we call a culture of justice, healing, and peace for all living beings and the earth.
Sure.
So for me, refreshing, other things, not only the bad stuff, and also I'm seen as an asset because at that time, I'm part of URI Europe. And
Right.
at that time, there was not, I think, not one other organization in URI which was doing religious freedom.
Hmm.
So for them, it was a good thing that I would come there because they all also have problems of religious freedom. So they could come to me and say, "Oh, can you help on this?" So it was a very good match.
Nice.
Yeah. And so I continued engaging with URI for years in Europe, mainly, and meeting with them. We had like annual gathering, meeting new people, increasing my network in the interfaith field, which is a bit different. And I can talk more about it later, a bit different than the religious freedom multi-faith field.
Right. Yeah. This is just because you have these advocate organizations that are focused on religious freedom. Like my organization is not a religious freedom organization, right? It deals with interfaith engagement. We deal with a lot of different things and the Aman message. But under dignity, then that's where you get to religious freedom, with us. And so we still advocate, still are in the religious freedom space. But the interesting part about URI is that there's these different sort of buckets of interests, and it's faith communities coming together to advocate for, like you said, the climate, or for efficiency in government, or this or that or something. And so you can tap into that subject matter expertise at will, right? To push, to fortify, for example, the religious freedom agenda, or, like I said, the climate agenda, or a specific issue that's happening in the country. That's just how the structures work?
I would say not exactly, and I will tell you why. So URI, as a global entity, is not doing advocacy. URI is nurturing a movement of people who are working together to make the world better. So, URI will not come and make statements against this or that.
Sure.
We will make sure that, we have more than 1,200 cooperation circles, and URI is in more than 120 countries. So it's a lot, not enough, but a lot.
Sure.
And we make sure that, the basic rule for a cooperation circle is a minimum of 3 different religions, faith tradition, or spiritual tradition. So we are enforcing a policy of you need to work together. It's all inclusive, and you need to work together. That alone, that powerful idea, that alone is making changes. So you will have, people who are from 2 different ethnical backgrounds,
Right.
and they will organize dinners together. That looks completely stupid, but sometimes in places where you have conflict, it makes a huge difference, because they never spoke together before.
Sure.
And
food is very intimate. Food diplomacy is something that we do very, very a lot at Muslims for Muslims. And so food diplomacy makes a difference, because you're building relationships over something very intimate.
Exactly. And you make friends. And when you have friends, you don't fight anymore. So, and the fact that we have 1,200 and the number is increasing every day, that is what makes a difference. It's not like one statement from URI which is going to change the world. No, it is the grassroots work of our cooperation circles that they do every day. And every day you have many of these activities taking place, and that is creating a change. And we have, since the beginning of the year, we had more than, I think, something like 50 new cooperation circles. It never stops. New are created, new are joining, and they work together. We make sure that we put them into communication so that they can benefit from their knowledge, and they can do joint initiatives, either from the same region, either from different regions. They do a project together. So it's that kind of movement that we are trying to get all over the planet, to make a grassroots change. And I believe that at the end, that's what matters. Governments, you need to work with them and engage with them, and that's something I've done for a long part of my life. But when you are making sure that the people become friends, whatever their religious background is, you win the day, and even a bad government cannot go against this.
So I'm a big fan, I'm big fan of civil society all the way, so I'm like way in with the civil society movement. And so when you talk about initiatives, what are the cornerstone or capstone initiatives of URI as you see it, that are bringing communities together and affecting change?
Okay, so it's very difficult because, as I told you, we do not tell the cooperation circles what they need to do.
Sure, it's like from the ground up, isn't it? Is that how?
Yes, it is. Nevertheless, we have, just recently we have finished our strategic framework for 2025, 2030, where we have identified some priorities. And so, of course, we have priorities, which is to grow the movement, grow the connectivity, grow the numbers of initiatives, and we have a strategy for that. also grows the visibility, because I mean, URI is a jewel. It's a fantastic thing, and it's a pity that not everyone know about it.
Sure.
It is the largest grassroots interface organization in the world,
Yeah.
so we need to have a visibility which goes with it. Okay, but we have two areas where we want to increase our initiatives and help the cooperation circles doing more of this. One is preventing religiously motivated violence.
Mm.
And so we are training people on this with very simple tools that anyone can put into practice that are very efficient. Sometimes, most of the times, the more simple it is, the simpler it is, the most efficient it is. And we do it in communities, from little communities in Africa to India to Europe, everywhere. We organize trainings and we get people to become specialists in preventing violence in their environment.
Right.
Sometimes it's way too late. You don't go into the middle of a war trying to do violence prevention.
Sure.
I would love to be able to do that and that it would work, but unfortunately, we are not yet at this point. But if you create this non-violent environment, and it's not even non-violent, it's more like you create the grounds where the grass of violence will not be able to flourish.
Sure. Yeah.
And the more we do that, the more we have chances that in the future we see the conflicts going down instead of rising as they do now.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of what we want to do. We also are engaged in everything that is related to healing the earth and all living beings. I mean, it's a cliche to say that we are in a crisis, ecological crisis. Call it as you want. Some people say it's climate, whatever. I don't
Sure.
care. There is a crisis, and we need to be aware that what we do to the earth, we do it to our future, we do it to our children, we do it to the earth of tomorrow. And it's better to think of it now than to try to cure in a few years. It's already, some people say it's too late. I never buy it.
Right.
I'm the kind of person never too late, but still, there is a thing to do. So healing the earth is part of it. It includes working a lot with indigenous. One thing in URI, which is, I think, very interesting, is we have included indigenous into the whole grassroots thing, and we are working. Sometimes there is a big division, if you go to Latin America, between some mainstream religions and indigenous.
Yeah.
Indigenous, for some reasons, are very bitter against Christians, and Christians think that indigenous, and it's a big generalization, not true of all indigenous and all Christians, of course, but you have this division, and we put them together. We are a bridging organization. We bridge the gaps between people.
Yeah. No, well, it's interesting because you're the community, you're building relationships, you can attack issues as they come up, and then as those relationships get stronger and stronger, the communities can then own the the issues that are happening within their communities, their larger countries, and then also mentor each other globally. And that's really the cornerstone of URI and how it works, right? And so and like you said, I know I wasn't trying to back you into a corner with like, okay, what are you doing now and how is it working? But the strength is that it's relationship building, and then cross cultural, cross faith sharing of skill sets and how-tos that allow individual communities to deal with the problems they're confronting effectively. And so it's in an interesting model. And like you said, it is the largest global model. I mean, that multi-faith model. And I was mentioning to some of my colleagues, and they're like, "You are right." They're like, "What are you talking about?" And I go, "Well, I was like, that the promotion's on them, so they have to do better at promoting it. I'll put them on the podcast, and we could chat a little bit about it. And then I show them the website and show them what's going on, and they go, "Well, how come I've never heard of these people?" I go, "Well, they're kind of." There's a phrase in Urdu. It's "kam karo besa panao." It's like, keep your head down, work hard, make money. Like that's kind of how they do it. But now you guys are so large enough where you can. It's now time to sort of shout it from the rooftops and engage. And like you said, you're the way you always in Washington, if you ever want to have an event and you ever want to get enough people there, you always offer lunch, and then people come, and you guys do a lot of sort of food diplomacy. So it was smart. It's a smart thing to do. So when it comes to like multi-faith, like, from the religious freedom scale, and, religious freedom's on the rise, right? We always talk about the doom and gloom, but your organization has had a lot of, has been effective at creating the sort of the safe spaces for people to interact with each other, which is a huge win. When it comes to how you interact with or respond to issues, and I want to be careful about how I say that, but when a community has a need and they're part of the URI network, how does that work? How does the communication work for that community in need to address the issue? And we don't have to define the issue, but how does that work?
Well, that's a good question, which is always a living question. I mean, I'm not the chair of URI for such a long time. It's 1 year I'm the chair. So I became a trustee in 2022 for Europe. Then I guess people thought I was doing a good job, and they elected me as a chair last September. But since September, we have done a lot of things, of course, and I've been involved in URI for a long time. And it's a difficult question. The reason is this one. So, for example, I do advocacy with one of my NGOs, which is the European Anti-Religious Forum for Religious Freedom, because it's an advocacy organization. So let's say that there is a group coming to me saying, look, we are in troubles and we need some support. I would come with a letter signed, as we do in Washington, the sign-on letters with many signatures. So I could come with the same kind of things, writing to a government, asking for, please stop discriminating against this group. That's pure advocacy, and I know how to do it. But when it comes to your right, it's very different for several reasons. People would come from regions in conflict, and they are suffering, and they ask for you to take side for them.
Right.
And then you realize that in the other side of the conflict, you also have cooperation circles, and maybe they will ask you to take side for them.
Sure.
And finally, you have to decide not which side do I take, is what can I do to be efficient, And if I just write a letter asking for peace, what is the effect? Everybody could do it with no effect. Governments do not care. And I would love that I write, stop now, it's time for peace. And it works.
Yeah.
It won't, The day it works, I will do it.
Right.
But so the first thing you need to do is to listen. We did like stupid things like listening sessions. A community is in trouble, you listen to them. You organize a Zoom meeting, or you go there and you listen to their troubles, and you try to help first by understanding what's going on. And then, as I said, we are a bridging organization, meaning that we don't take sides in anything. Our side is, of course, for peace, not in advocating without effect, but with creating things that will, at the end, bring peace. And as I said, sometimes in zones of conflict or war, it's just not possible to be efficient, at least for us. Maybe someone can be, but at the end, the whole work that we do is done for creating the ground for this not to happen again. So we are very We don't reject any ask for help. We don't go into broad advocacy. Maybe in some cases we can, we can decide to do it. It's not a fixed rule, but most of the time, we try to put people together. We try to increase activities that will create more peace. And sometimes I've been even criticized for this, like people telling me, well, you are not taking stand for something and you are afraid of being disruptive.
Sure.
Well, okay, first of all, I've been disruptive most of my life, so you cannot say I'm afraid of it, but fine, but you have to think with, URI is one instrument for bringing, it's not the only one for bringing more peace,
Right.
I'm completely okay that we have cooperation circles who do advocacy, they do advocacy. We have to be like not that kind of organization. We help cooperation circles to do their work on the ground.
Yeah, more effectively and
More
with
effectively. And at the end, in URI, you have very diverse kind of people. Some people will think a way and some others will think differently. And me being the chair, how can I say that what I say represents all of URI? Impossible. It will never, because they will never agree on something like this. We just agree on what is our work and what we should do for the earth and people.
right. Right. Well, it's interesting. It's an interesting model, and how, and so how when it comes to like dealing with other groups, the collaboration with other groups that are in country. For example, we share in common the Earth Secretariat, right? I was a founding board member of the Earth Roundtable, in Washington in 2009. We were a founding organization at the American Islamic Congress. So, when it comes to plugging into these larger networks, you're in Brussels. I'm sure you're slugging it out with, the EU Parliament, and I'm sure you're dealing with the UN quite a bit with, with the UDHR and all that other stuff. When it comes to plugging into these larger groups that do take stands, right? How does that work? Because you have to be careful. You have to be very judicious in how you interact with some of these entities.
Well, personally, I just know some little stable data. I don't go into politics. I don't care left, right. I don't support any of them. I support people, and I don't go against any of them because I don't think the problem is left or right. I think the problem is the mindset of some people on this planet, and they are from the left, from the right, and most of the people from both are good people, So I don't want to fuel or feed more conflict into an already very divided world. So
Sure.
no politics. Then I always think about what will be the most efficient, taking into account the security of the members of URI too. We have members in countries where being an interfaith activist can be dangerous.
Sure.
So we cannot like put them in danger. We want them to be able to do what they can where they are and increase their network and not being targeted and become martyrs of the cause. I'm not interested in that at all. So that's where I would be careful. Besides this, we have interaction with many other groups where we do joint initiatives, joint seminars, joint gathering, and we work a lot with Charter for Compassion. We a lot of work. We have Karen, who is the current ED of URI. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were together in Washington, I think in February, and we were at the Earth Roundtable together. So, we will be there, meet people, see if there is things that we can engage together with.
Sure.
We work with the UN a lot, also because URI is born in relationship with the UN. The URI started by Bishop Swing, Reverend Bill Swing.
Yeah.
And he was asked to do an interfaith prayer for a UN-related day in San Francisco. He was the Bishop of California. and it did it, and that's where he realized that it would be good to have a united religions as there is a United Nations, so
Right. I remember the origin story, and I didn't, I didn't think about it. I don't think about it in a profound way, because it's like it's one of those things that it happened and it was, but it is profound, right? You have the United Nations, which is United Nations, right? And that's the politics of things, right? But then the idea of the United Religions is profound, and the fact that you or I kind of took the mantle of that 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 one moment in time and then started to expand, and now you're in 120 countries, is an amazing feat. From its very humble, big things have small beginnings, right? And so that arc and that tie to the UN, and like I said, it's one of those things that kind of, maybe being in the Earth movement, you kind of know, and you say, that's how they were formed and that's how that worked. But the closeness to the UN and the UDHR as a companion entity that stays informal, in the sense that it doesn't, like I said, take sides or focus on specific issues, but then builds relationships to be a force multiplier for communities that are in need, is really where it's at.
it is, but there is an interesting thing that happened after it has been the idea came, as United Nations, you have nations together, and I think per what I understood from Bill Swing, the original idea was to put religions together, meaning like the religious leaders, representing their religion together as a United Nations, but for religions.
Right.
But it did not work. He
Sure.
met with Dalai Lama, he met with a lot of religious leaders, and he came back after traveling the world and he said, well, I think we will have to do it with people, not with leaders, you know,
Yeah.
and and that's how it became grassroots.
It's much better, much more effective. I mean, I that's my challenge. Well, this is a personal statement. It's very, very difficult, because when you deal with religious leaders, you're not necessarily dealing with, especially if it's a religious leader that represents constituencies in multiple countries and globally. The issues that they deal with are diverse and may not translate into the bureaucracy of a faith leader, and so that's the uniqueness of URI and how it works. On the just on the face of it, provides an opportunity for, like I said, the transfer of skills, the transfer of communication, the interaction, the relationship building. Whereas it's very, very difficult to do that if you have to wait for a leader to make a decision, and then figure out how the community might follow. You're part of your own faith, and I interact with the Church of Scientology quite a bit when I was at the American Islamic Congress. Not so much anymore, but I know I was always amazed at the structures that you guys have just within your church, and because we're I'm a small group and a small sect in Islam, so it's really funny. And I go, God, they were so organized. It was like, how do you get this done over here? And so there's both benefits and and there's challenges to having bureaucracies. But when it comes to you as a faith group, and as you plug into URI, and as you plug into the religious freedom movement, the challenge is that how do you balance the needs of your community with the needs of the many? How does that work because I know you're a religious freedom advocate and you do advocacy. Sometimes it can be difficult because your community is burning over here while you're helping other communities. So how do you walk that tightrope?
Yeah, very good questions. But I have an answer, because I lived through it. So it's a real personal and lived answer. First of all, I always continue to work to defend my community and Scientologists. It's not something I have put aside and I don't do it anymore. So I have a big part of my work, which is dealing with problems that we can have, or even when we don't have problems, promoting Scientology and making sure that we are thriving, helping my community. So that I do it. Nevertheless, I will tell you a story a true story that I use sometimes to explain why finally it's beneficial for everyone when you work for others. So one day, 2015, there are some attacks, terrorist attacks in Brussels. Or I don't remember if it was Brussels or Paris, one of them, you know. And I'm in Brussels. I go into like a kebab doner sandwich seller,
Sure.
and I asked for a sandwich. And on the TV, there is like you know, it's running about the terrorist attacks,
Right.
Muslim terrorist attacks, you know.
Yeah.
And the guy who is doing the sandwich is a Muslim, and he's like complaining that it's gonna be horrible for Muslims now because of the terrorists, because now the discrimination would increase. I mean, you know how it works, you know.
Yeah.
And then I tell him, look, guy, I really understand what you are going through. And because I was going, you know, the day after I was speaking into a religious freedom event, and I said, look, I'm a religious freedom advocate. And, you know, there are still people in that city that will defend your right to practice your religion, whatever happens with that silly terrorist, you know.
Sure.
And if there is anything I can do, I'm here for you know, or something like this, you know. And the guy was touched, you know, because there was also clients listening, you know, so it was, for him, it was important that I would acknowledge. And I did it, you know, without any thinking, you know, just very genuinely. And the guy told me, oh, that's nice what you say, we talk. And he said, but what are you, you know, and are you a religious person? I say, yes, I'm from the Church of Scientology, and I believe in religious freedom. And then he says, wow, you know what? Um, Scientologists are very good people. I
Right.
would say that to the people I know.
Hmm.
And I was like, you know, I was not thinking of it, but then that is the effect. And I came back to my community and I told them, stop defending yourself, go and defend others, and they will be the ones defending you, you
Yeah.
know. And that's just a little anecdote, but that's how it works, you know. You cannot expect that if you don't do anything for others, they will do something for you. And
Yeah.
we all need each other. So I feel very good defending others because first of all, I think they deserve it, as any human being deserves dignity. And secondly, it does not go against my own community. It helps them too.
Yeah. No, well, I think I appreciate you sharing that story. I think that that's, you know, that's the sort of lead out to the idea of religious freedom, the idea that, you know, we're coming together, we're spending time, we're advocating for others. And in doing so, you're strengthening your own community because not only do you have relationships with people that will come to your aid and because they know you, but the other side of it is that you have tangible results that you've given your time, effort, and money, and brain space to help. And that, you know, like I said, I've worked with the Church of Scientology for, I mean, since 2009, and we've worked a lot on collaborative issues. I don't know if I've worked with some of these issues in the you know, the former Soviet Union and some of the former republics with Anna, but I haven't worked on a lot of issues. Hungary was one of them. That was years ago. But I think I introduced somebody to a contact there, government contact. That was all I did. But aside from that, we've worked sort of shoulder to shoulder for religious minorities, and they've always been a good collaborative partner. We were American Islamic Congress, so we had money, and then the church had money. So we were like one of the two groups that had money in DC that could actually mobilize for events and stuff. But even still, like, our interests were unique within our own faiths, and but our unity of mission was always religious freedom, and then obviously dignity. And so, you know, that's how I built a relationship with the church. So I appreciate you saying that and sharing that story, because it's very similar to the story that I've had with the church in the United States and how we've worked globally. I remember my story to you is with Sue Taylor. And so, who is I don't know exactly her title. I always say she's like the high priest of the church in the United States, but I'm not sure if that's happening. But I always say I think she's like the supreme high commander, high priestess. So, but that's how I depict her. But you know, we have a, you know, I always, you know, give her a hug and stuff. But I remember when it was winter in Afghanistan, and I'm American of Afghan descent. So I was trying to get socks, and we were chatting, and she goes, "What's the word you're saying?" I go, "Socks, the thing you put on your feet." And she goes, "Oh, socks." And for some reason, my pronunciation of socks is, she wasn't getting it. But the fact is that the church was able to mobilize to purchase and help deliver with us socks for the winter, for Afghans in the winter. And that's a perfect example of a collaborative project. And of course, outsiders are saying, "Oh, the Church of Scientology is going to convert people in Afghanistan." I was like, "What? Like, they're not. There's no, like, there's zero chance of anybody going into Scientology in Afghanistan." Just so you know, I was like, there's no way. And there's no Scientologists that are going to be on the ground anyways. But even still, like, there's zero chance. It's just the Scientologists being nice. And I used to just say that. I was like, they're just being nice. They're taking money that they have and they're buying socks and they're getting them to Afghanistan. And we're helping facilitate that, but they see that as an important element. And it was just really funny, some of the comments that got back. And here I am, a Muslim, saying, "Yeah, there's like zero, it's 0.08% is non-Muslim. It's just not going to happen." And I don't even know how you would explain. I'm trying to think, like, I got some Urdu, Farsi, so Dari and Pashto, and I go, I don't even know how I'd explain the church, how it works to anybody, even in my native tongue. So it's like, but that's not what's happening. And I think it's always very difficult because people always feel like if you're doing something that's beneficial to somebody else and a sacrifice to yourself, you expect something back. And I think the challenge is, to a certain degree, we expect a relationship, but that's it. And I think a lot of people don't understand that in the religious freedom space, and that, like, our interaction when we got on the phone, we've been in the same room many times. We're not old friends. We're old acquaintances. But we build a relationship. But we've been in the same space, working in the same space, and working with similar people. And we have a relationship because we know the work by the people we interact with, and the communities we have. And so I think that people don't realize that quality, and the importance of that quality.
It is, and I think so. One thing that is very I think relevant when we talk about URI, but also in the field of religious freedom that in DC and elsewhere, is interreligious or multi-faith dialogue is one thing, it's good, but action and cooperation is even better. I mean, sometimes some people, they are from two different faiths. They usually don't like each other because they don't know each other, and they work together on something. They don't have any other choice that collaborating, and they do something together. They are, proud of what they did. It's handled. You don't even need dialogue. I mean, dialogue can start there, and it will be much easier than something more esoteric or whatever, That's how you create friendship, and you do, by doing this, the work of religious freedom, because both of them, they will defend the religious freedom of the other because they became friends.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you, that's for sure. When it comes to Church of Scientology, the truth is, it's not that I'm expecting something in return. But one thing is true, I've been in many places. I've done a lot of work, and I know the work that other Scientologists do. So I'm proud of what we do. Very proud. We have a lot of initiatives all over the world for human rights, for drug prevention. That are the core things of the church, But also many people working on other issues, people who are working on preserving animals in Africa, South Africa, other places, and do a fantastic job. We have people like me working on interfaith, religious freedom, etc., etc. So I'm proud, and I'm not going to accept people discriminating against Scientologists. Maybe at the beginning I was a bit shy and I would accept. It's finished now. I think there is no reason for that. Anyone can learn what it is. You go on the internet, you go on our website, and you learn, what are our beliefs. and then you can make your own idea. So there is no excuse to say, I don't know what it is, and discriminate because I don't know. Nobody can pretend that we are the way we were depicted at one point, the very dangerous cult, whatever you call it, I mean, all the religions are called a cult somewhere, so, but it's not okay, there needs to be a minimum of respect. And even in the interfaith field, you can sometimes encounter people who have bias,
Sure.
And so the good thing is, if you don't go into it, they will never change.
Yeah.
If you go into it and you confront this and you talk to people, they have a chance to change. And it's more for them. I'm always, thinking it's bad to be mean at someone. It's first bad for you.
Yeah.
So I always see when I talk to someone and try to, make him less biased against Scientology or another religion, first I do it for himself, because I think it's a pity that this person is mean. And
Yeah.
maybe it's a theological thing which you can find in every religion, being mean is not a good thing for yourself first,
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's the idea of that engagement, just it is in every faith, but how it takes a little time. It takes something to step out of yourself to get into it with someone, and to do it in a respectful way while you're maintaining dignity of the other person. It can be
Yeah.
challenging. As a Muslim, I've been dealing with it most of my life, so I own a series of businesses. We have the American flag outside the business, and it was just ripped down, and we just went into this whole thing about how someone felt because where as a Muslim owns the business, then the American flag shouldn't be flying from it, right? Forget the fact of my government service and all this other stuff. so we it's and so you got to confront bias or a negative behavior, and then you got to do it in a way in which you're respecting the other. Like the police were like, "Do you want to press charges?" I was like, "No." And so I was like, I know what it's like to have to deal with the burden of something like that. So I was like, no, but let's make sure that if we can talk with this guy, let's talk to him, and so we facilitated a meeting where we chatted a little bit about it, about what he's thinking and what's going on, because we don't want the business to be a target, but that's something that's very real, and it's difficult when you're on the receiving end of it, but I appreciate you taking the time, and it means a lot for you to share some of your stories and anecdotes, and the idea of two faiths like ours speaking with each other about the multi-faith space and we, like I said, have interacted before. We haven't worked together on initiatives, but we know a lot of people in the same space and have been in the same room, on the same initiatives. This is the purpose of not only the podcast, but also faith engagement, and for our listenership who is asking us, genuinely, if what's a conversation about religious freedom between two separate faiths? And I one of the reasons why we reached out to you was, I was like, I know Eric, but we've never worked together. Sue Taylor, the conversation with Sue would be very different, and with Anna, extremely different, because we know each other. We slugged it out. We're on the streets together, but we're from two different worlds, right? So you're European, I'm American. You're a Scientologist, I'm Muslim. We've got all these differences, and I'm overjoyed that we cracked the egg on extending and growing our relationship. But in doing so, we did it through, when we started the podcast, they said, we don't even have a specific topic to talk about other than you or I maybe sort of hanging there. So I appreciate you taking the time, and it means a lot.
Thank you. And I appreciate to be there, and to talk to you. I mean, if you agree, it looks like we are going to an end. So I may try to summarize something,
Go for it. Let's hear it.
Yeah. And I'm not afraid of saying that I have a dream, and my dream is certainly shared by you and many other people, but I have a dream of a world where people would live together, and it would not be focused on division, it would not be focused on differences, but it would be focused on what we want to accomplish together, you know. And that's a completely, it's an utopia. So, okay, let's say, but I really don't care, you know. I don't see any utopia as something you cannot reach. I think that everything is reachable. It requires a lot of work, a lot of integrity, and you have to work on yourself to be the best of yourself too, you know. You have to work with others. You have to learn a lot of different things in many different areas, you know, because it's not just one thing to live. Live is something you need to learn how to do it, you know, living. And so, but still, if we don't have the purpose and if we are not convinced that we can do it, looks like a political thing, you know, we can do it. But anyway, if we don't have this, we don't do anything. And I work in the church, in my church, but also in the field of religious freedom and in URI with a lot of fantastic people. Honestly, I'm not saying it because I want to promote them, but it is true. You know, it's almost emotional if I say it, because you cannot imagine, or maybe you can, but it's difficult to imagine how much these people are involved of doing things to better what's going on in the world. So I'm very proud. I'm very happy of what I'm doing. I'm very not proud of myself only, you know, proud of myself, yes, but of everyone working with me, including the ED of URI, Karen, but also all the other staff working there, all the other trustees, and all the other leaders in the regions that I meet. And I'm always touched by the little things or big things that they do. And it's like an incredible life. And I believe that if I want to continue that incredible life, which is a gift for me, I need to work every day more. You know, it's not for free, you know,
Yeah.
but it pays.
We have
And
similar views. I'm defined by my work, you know, and so, and I love the business that I'm in, even as terrible as some of the news can be. You know, it makes a difference. But I appreciate you sharing this with me and taking the time. It means a lot.
perfect, John. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend.